So we are preparing to sew, and I'm choosing these old rules of intestines because they're less brittle than the brand new ones, and they'll be easier to sew for the inexperienced hands. I'm going to give you about that much.
Okay.
And I will cut both ends. This is for only practice. Remember I talked about bugs eating?
The edge.
Yeah.
Got a couple spots.
Can you keep it in the freezer?
Yes. Yeah, that's where I'm putting mine.
Oh, okay.
Okay. But I'm going to go ahead and still. We can use this this side. This is embroidery thread. Regular embroidery thread before it has 6 strands, but you need to add 2 more strands in order to make a full thread for that one. Pardon?
You waxed it yourself?
Yes. I have
It's right here.
where? Oh, beeswax. I'm going to do it this way. Right now I don't know which side is inside. Oh, I think this is outside, this is inside. This is how, in our culture, this is how we do it. You fold it in like this, inward.
How do you know which way is the inside
Huh?
and out?
Sometimes, remember Elaine said that one side is smoother, one side is rougher.
Oh, yeah.
That's usually the inside will be smoother and the outside will be rougher.
So you fold it inside. The outside's away from you? Okay.
We talked about how we wet this, and I mentioned that the comparison I made myself using just plain water that will make it too wet and make it like it gets dried so fast. But when you use your saliva, it seems better.
Yeah.
Better. So
So we split them in half and then we're going to put them against each other?
you will taste the salt in there because I use salt. This is how you start. You don't start from that side. You don't put your needle through on this side. You outwards, okay? Okay, this is how you do it. And you leave that much. This one. And then.
Oh, you don't nut?
Yeah, you don't. And you don't knot it.
Okay.
Because they say
Catch?
that the knot will catch somewhere, and you pull it and it'll tear. Watch how I pull my thread.
Very straight.
Out straight. And this is and And when you're going to tighten it, you put these two fingers and pull your thread this way, not this way, out this way, but not too hard.
Okay.
Enough for your thread to kind of
Cinch.
yeah. This is too. Your needles will be sharper, so it'll be
Easier.
pull your needle and thread underneath this grass,
Okay.
and then over here that's
The other.
when you put in the other thread. And then you don't tighten it that way. Just
One way.
pull it slightly. It's and then your needle goes on top of this.
Is that hole next to the other hole? Or
Yeah. Try to measure your stitches, same line. And then your needle goes through this side underneath this grass. And this is where you tighten again with pinched. Oops.
I can thread it again. It's like a figure 8.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah.
Just, sometimes when you pull it too hard, when you pull your string too hard, it'll bunch up. Well, remember too, if you don't make so many mistakes, you will not know whether you're learning or not. It's beginner's shape. You think you're ready?
Mm-hmm.
In the previous section, Mary demonstrated how to sew gut by stitching away from you, over the grass, through the gut, to under the grass on the other side, then stitching over the grass, through the gut, to under the grass back to the side facing you. This technique is demonstrated again in the section Sewing a Model Gut Window. In the following review with Eve, she uses an easier stitch for learning, stitching over the grass to over the grass on the other side, then under the grass and under the grass toward you.
So the way you fold the gut is there's a different direction for whether it's a window or for clothing. And for this direction, we're using it for clothing style. This is for clothing, which keeps the element from going towards the inside of the material. And it reinforces the seam at the same time. And so with these double folded pieces, when it's stitched and laid flat, it'll keep it water resistant if you do your stitches well enough. So you're folding the smooth side is here, and then you're folding the rough side over. So it's rough side to rough side. And then after it's stitched and flattened out, your grass and your smooth side will be towards the body when it's flattened. So, moistening the seal gut, it has to stay moist. Everything has to have a flexibility when you start. Your thread needs to be waxed so it doesn't chafe or fray, which is we already done with beeswax. And then the grass is soaking right now, and so I'm not making this dripping wet. I'm just using a couple drops of water spread across my palm and then gliding it over to where it's free moving. And then when you get your needle on there, this thread is specially tapered, so the thickness of your thread will always be the same no matter what. So you have to slide it down further enough that the taper wraps on itself, and it makes a uniform thickness down the whole piece when it gets doubled over, so you're not working with some part that's a double thread. And this is where the wax part is super handy. Just gently roll it together. It'll stick more to itself once you start stitching. So I've lined them up with the proper folds. Then you're going to have a piece of wet grass in the front and the back. So what the knot does, it keeps the pieces from sliding too far out of place, because if your back one's too short, your skin will buckle towards one side or the other. And so I'm going just a little bit past the edge of the gut, because it's going to move a little bit when you first start sewing. And all of this is dampened and a little slippery. This is slipping. So I'm just going to line that back up, get my needle started, and then add the grass to it. And so we're going to start not directly on the edge. We're going to work it just a little bit past the edge. So I'm going to put my first stitch in there. And then we're going to leave an inch of tail, at least an inch, and if you need it, an inch and a quarter, because we don't use the knots because it makes these tension points in the fabric. So this part of the tail is going to be stitched in with the grass, so it gives the fabric more flexibility, the gut for your garment. And so the stitches aren't just a straight line like the dots, the lines on the road, the dash marks. They're actually a little zigzag, and that keeps your garment flexible. And you'll need a give and flexibility to be able to have the garment move with you and not rip apart when you have to do a stretch, or if you gain weight, or if you have to change your clothes you wear underneath. So I'm going to line that up here. And so depending on your preference, you choose when you go around your back grass, you can choose to go under or over from the top or the bottom of the grass. But whichever way you choose, you have to keep it the same way through the rest of the garment, because when the thread changes directions, it puts a little tension spot and it makes it uneven and not pretty. The way my grass is positioned, I'm going to keep it here, and then I'm going to not go directly underneath it, but just a little bit over my next stitch point, so it makes a slight zigzag. So now I'm holding the thread, the 4 layers of the gut, and the grass. So that's 6 layers. So you have to really pay attention to your grip. And then I'm just going to put the needle point in. And the trickiest is always when you're starting it, because you don't want to poke your finger. So I braced it against my hand. There's the first stitch. And you don't want to pull it super tight because you're just starting. You just need it to be not loose, but not, you don't want to pop through the gut or the grass. And now I'm going to add the front piece of the grass. So I just put my back side stitch underneath the grass. So I'm going to position this grass so the stitch is underneath. So my front side grass, I'm going to stitch over the top of it, above and to the side, and then come out above the back piece of grass. We're going only through the gut. We're not going through the thread and the grass. That's because that will shred the fibers when you start moving and wearing the garment, and that will just pull it apart if the fibers get shredded. You can go trying to angle your needle. See, it's just a straight through and through on one level. You can try to go like this to get it tricky to go over the one side and go onto the other side. So when you choose whether you're going from top to bottom, like this is, I'm coming out the top, and then my next needle point will go to the bottom. That's what you want to remember for your directionality. And then you're not going directly up and down. See, my next needle point is not here. It'll be slightly to the side to make a zigzag stitch. So now I'm going under the back side grass and then under the front side grass. So you don't want to pull too hard because everything will start curling and bending like that. It'll pop through. So what you want to do is have it flat and stay firm. And you just pull it gently and you'll see the grass start to move, and that's when you stop pulling, because the grass has to give. And then I'm tucking this tail under for looks and for protection so that tail end doesn't fray and come out. I'm just using the tip of the needle to do it, and this is a piece of grass fiber that I can take off. Line it back up. Pull gently. And now I'm going back. Now my next stitch is over and above the top grass, and then above the back grass. Now the back side, I'm going under, coming out under the front grass. I'm going to hold the whole thing and pull a little bit. So now, going back from the front side, I'll make sure your layers are still there, that you're going through all 4 layers and that the bottom one didn't slide up. So I've got my grass flat, going above the grass to above the other side of the grass. And you only want to be stitching through gut. It's a little tricky for getting both sides of it, but with practice you'll become familiar with the width of your grass so you're not poking through it and it doesn't get shredded. The more you can keep these fibers intact, the stronger your garment will be. So I did that. So I'm going to keep it there, a little tension, pull it. And so the important part to keep straight and uniform is the thread, and the grass will just go with the stitches. If you run out of your grass part, you take a couple fibers off and taper it like the thread is tapered, and then you just lay the grass fibers, new ones, on top of the old ones. See, this is getting a little short. So at this point, where there's an inch or so of the grass, then I would strip down some of the fibers to taper it. So for the new grass that would come on here, you don't want all of the overlap suddenly happening in one place. So some people like to stagger it. So then I just do this. Taper the grass a little. And then the new grass would get, the new pieces would be laid onto there, so it's not as bulky. And of course you use like a knife or something. And then the new grass would just go over there. And then you keep going as usual. And so if your thread runs out, it's the same deal as stitching the new stuff over the old stuff. Because this thread is tapered, you're going to have an overlap of 3 to 4 inches, whereas when you start you only have 1 inch to 1.25 inches of overlap. So your old thread will just get tucked under. So when you end it, and then your new thread will get started right next to your last stitch, and then the new tail gets tucked in the way we just started that one. So you'll be stitching over 3 pieces of thread. The old tail, the new tail, and then will be your new lead. And your new lead thread will be going through. And it's not that hard to overlap this one because it's already been tapered for so long. You don't have to worry about it putting knots in there.
We're sewing seal gut and with grass, and I broke the grass twice already, and I didn't have it, I don't think I had it either wet enough or it just split easy. I don't know if that happened for anybody else, but it sure happened for me a couple of times. I'm trying to keep my stitches nice and tight and pulling. I think I was pulling too hard when I pulled. She told me I was to pull it in, and I seen everyone else's was bunching up a little bit, and then I tried to pull hard, and then I broke the grass. So it was either not wet enough or I was pulling too hard. I don't know. One or the other. You have to wet it with wet the grass. The grass has to be a little bit flexible, so you have to either wet it with your saliva, put it through your mouth, or you could just take a little bit from your fingers and go all the way down. But then you have to keep it wet the whole time you're sewing it.
It is a harvested, dried, processed. The skin is processed and the grass is processed, but it's still like a living material that you have to constantly baby to keep flexible. So you have to keep that wetness as you go. It'll dry out. You can't just take a break, drop it, and come back to it because it turns completely brittle, unworkable. So you have to pay attention as you go along. You either keep your water with you or you get used to the taste of it. So you've got to keep the gut wet, flexible, and then the grass, and then your thread from unraveling, and then your stitch length. If you can get far enough to know, your brain starts to feel that, oh, it needs water, so you gotta get it wet and to be able to work with it. It's like, oh no, I kept that wet, but now my stitches are starting to go off. So it's all these things you're orchestrating as a material to try to make this really nice piece. So then you gotta figure out, you get used to noticing that it becomes just second habits. Like you just start, every so often you just start noticing when to, so then you can focus on your stitches, when to get wet, and it's a really interesting, yeah, orchestrating it.